Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of At the Movies with William Fletcher. And as per usual, I am your host, William Fletcher, and I'm joined this week by Aaron for a third episode this time.
Hello.
Yeah, and
Hello.
this week we are going to be talking about the Thor at current time of recording trilogy in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So this is coming out, I'm just going to say, a week earlier than it usually would have, because I had something planned, a special episode planned for when this would have usually gone out, so that's why this is happening now, and it don't want to happen after, because it'll be too late and all that stuff, So, yeah, I've covered the MCU once before, very in-depth, when Doctor Strange 2 came out, just like a couple months ago. So, Aaron, do you have any what are your sort of general thoughts on the MCU as like sort of a franchise?
I really like it. Like there's some like TV shows and like a couple of other things here and there that I'm like, as a big Marvel fan, I'm like, it doesn't really work.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah,
I was really annoyed personally when Thanos destroyed the stones with the stones.
Yeah.
Because if you've read the comics, you would know that the stones can't destroy the stones.
Mm-hmm.
You can't destroy the stones at all because they're a part of reality itself, like part of the part of the universe that makes the universe the universe.
Yeah.
So
I understand what you're saying there. Yeah,
but like overall, I really like it. I actually haven't seen Multiverse yet, so
okay. Well, we're not gonna be covering it, so that's fine.
a good thing.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
other than that, I think it's a pretty good adaptation of the comic books, and glad that I've been around to see it.
Yeah, I think I've sort of talked about this. I think maybe on here. I don't know if I have, but this is sort of a modern day, like sort of people of certain generations had certain film, like certain people had like Star Wars as like their big thing when they were growing up, and that sort of thing. And
Which
I think
is still my big thing.
It just but it wasn't like this. Like the MCU is sort of it's like the newer version of that, if that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah,
I get totally where you're coming from.
Yeah. So yeah, Thor. I think, to sort of lay my cards on the table, it took them a long time to get his character right. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't find him to be a particularly great character until Ragnarok, which was his third solo film, and it was his fourth film I think he was in. I think there was 2 Avengers films, and the first 2 Thor films.
Yeah. Look, I loved him in Age of Ultron, and kind of the interaction between him and Hulk, which you still see in Ragnarok.
Yeah.
And everyone else, like the whole scene when they're like, "You're not worthy," and he picks up the hammer and it's like, you're not worthy, or like the scene when Vision picks up the hammer, or like when they question like if the elevator moves and moves upwards, then is the elevator worthy?
Yeah. So yeah, I guess jumping right into the first Thor film, I don't think I saw this when it came out at the cinema. I think I would have seen this probably on DVD.
I would say same here.
And...
yeah, I honestly, you continue. Sorry.
Yeah, it's like it's not the first one isn't bad. I wouldn't go that far, but it definitely feels like early MCU. Like, I think the early days of Marvel, the first phase rather, from the first Iron Man film to the first Avengers, is very shaky, and they haven't got everything quite figured out yet.
Yeah. I would totally agree with that. I would say the first film is pretty integral because it leads to the first Avengers movie.
Yeah, like I think all the Phase 1 Marvel movies before the Avengers are all important, and they all lead to the Avengers, but they don't really, like, they're not great though. Like, I would say the first Iron Man is the only really good film in the first that sort of first group of films before the first Avengers, which is one of the best films of the franchise to me.
I think I would have to disagree with that one.
Oh,
Just
okay.
purely, I love Captain America. I love the first film. I think it really captured Captain America as a character and really set up his character really well, I think.
Like, yeah, so I guess to sort of, yeah, put it sort of in a general sense, I do think...
Because that's what the first phase is about, is setting up characters and like these are the characters.
Yeah, I do think that most of the Phase 1 films are very good at establishing the sort of integral parts of the next several years, with Captain America, Iron Man. Thor is a bit... We'll get into this in momentarily, but Thor, Hulk, they introduce all these things and all these characters, and I think as time has gone on, they've gotten better and better at introducing the characters to introducing new characters with their solo films. Mostly, I think most of what they've done to introduce characters is pretty solid. They haven't had like a perfect streak or had like a perfect run of films, but I think, they definitely...
They're doing better than DC.
DC is completely gone. DC just is... It's not going very well over there because I think...
tried to watch the first Justice League movie recently and I just stopped watching it. I just was like, it was like 2 hours in or something like that, and I was like, nah, I'm done. Can't.
Yeah, the first one, or like the one that came out last year, because there was one that...
what's the one when they like starting like Darkseid? They're like hinting at Darkseid, but it's not really Darkseid. It's like one of his minions.
I mean, it's technically both of those Justice League films. It's just that one of them has Darkseid in it, but it's 4 hours, and the other one is like 2 hours.
Yeah, it's the 4-hour one that I watched.
Yeah, no.
And I was just like, nah, fuck this. I'm out after 2 hours.
Yeah, no. It's I've talked about it on here how that film was a massive disappointment because it's just the same movie as the first Justice League film, just extended by 2 hours.
Oh, there's just so many things. Again, I'm a huge comic book fan. I love both Marvel and DC.
Yeah.
And there's so many things that just hurt me.
Yeah.
As I am, I know things about the characters in the comic books, and I'm like,
yeah. Yeah. So sort of to go on a comic and like sort of accuracy to the comics, how accurate like is this first Thor film to the original comic? Like how much well is this adapted?
I wouldn't say it's not too bad. It's not like, depending on, because there's like multiple iterations of the story being retold over and over again, as comic books do reboots.
Yeah.
I would say it's not bad.
Okay.
I'm fairly sure it follows one particular line. I can't remember, like a particular reboot, but I can't remember. But like, it's pretty accurate setting up the characters and all that. Like, I love how oh my god, the actor that plays Odin.
Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, Anthony Hopkins. I love how he does Odin. I'm a bit sad that you don't get to see him use his full powers, like use the full Odin force.
Yeah,
as it is. Yeah,
okay.
But I don't know. I still, again, all the characters are played really well, I would say, and pretty accurate.
Yeah. I'm not sure I would agree with that. I think that I think like there's no one who's bad. I wouldn't say there's any bad performances really. I do think the more human characters like Jane and Selvig and Darcy as well, God.
Oh yeah.
Were just sort of the weaker parts in the film. And I think when I did my Doctor Strange episode with Tom, we talked about how annoying we found Darcy as a character. And I think because this is her first film that she's in, is the first two Thor films. And I'm just like, because I don't have a dislike for the actress at all. I just think that just the way they write her character is kind of like, it's not, it just sort of needs, the writing needs to be better, is my point, really.
Could I add on to that?
Yeah, sure.
So like, talking about human characters, I'm going to talk about, all his Asgard friends, like Sif, Boulder, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I really don't like how they side push them, push them off on the side. They got they're there, but they're not really there. Like Sif is a really important part of the Thor story, and I think it's Boulder, not Boulder. I forgot his name, but one of the characters there becomes what's known as Mighty Thor in the comic books. So that his whole group of Asgardian friends are like really important.
Yeah.
In the comic books, but here they're like, put off the side.
Yeah.
No one gives a fuck about them.
Yeah, I think that's a problem with Thor stories and trying to do solo films with him, is they need to, because he's so strong of a character and at times he's a bit OP, so they need to do something with his character to be like, okay, well, we need a 2-hour film, and how are we going to do that? And in this one, they just take away Thor's powers entirely.
Which, that does happen in the comic books, and he dawns on an alter ego and everything. In this film, Yeah, but I like it, and I just don't like it at the same time.
It's definitely interesting, and also because the location the film is set is in New Mexico.
Yeah,
which feels a bit like, I don't know. It seems a bit odd to be like, this is where this Marvel film's gonna be set.
Well, if you think about it, New Mexico is like Roswell and stuff like that. So they're like, oh, he might be an alien. No, it turns out he's a god.
He's a god. Yeah.
But
I think location matters, and not that it couldn't work. It's just it doesn't
use
fully work. Yeah, exactly.
Going back to the powers being taken away.
Yeah.
So, you know what I find funny?
What?
Ragnarok completely contradicts the first movie, if you think about it. Because he gets the hammer taken away from him. The hammer gets destroyed. And the whole thing is, the power comes from within him. He's not Thor, god of hammers. He's Thor, god of thunder. Yeah. And so you think about it, in the first movie, he just gets his hammer taken away. So he's still a god, and he's still got his powers.
Well, it says here that he is exiled to Earth as a mortal, so he doesn't. So his powers are taken from him. So even
fine print.
Yeah, even if he didn't have, despite not having the hammer, he doesn't have the powers at all. But he still has the appetite of a god in that scene in the diner where he's just shoveling food down and he's drinking, and he's able to take on all of these SHIELD agents just
when
so
he says,
easily.
When he drinks the coffee and he goes, yes, another!
And then smashes the glass,
Yeah, that.
Yeah, it's because I do like the concept of putting someone like Thor, like a god or an alien or something, into regular human society and having them mingle with regular people. But
there's a lot of stories that do that as well, though. So many movies, TV shows, all that kind of stuff that does that kind of play all the time.
But this film, I feel doesn't take as full. I don't know. Something about this film just feels like it's missing something, and I don't know what it is exactly. It just something isn't quite right.
Yeah,
to me, but I think because we don't really see Asgard a whole lot in the film or anything. We see sort of go back and forth, but there's a lot of time on Earth and New Mexico, and then we'll have 5 minutes in Asgard, and then we'll cut back to New Mexico for another 20. And I understand that Thor's there and he's the main character, but I just don't find I don't know. I mean, Thor's the main character, and I'm just sort of like, but he's
Yeah.
because he's not an Asgard. Then I'm kind of like not interested in the Asgard stuff because I'm like it's not really doing a whole lot.
Yeah.
Like it is. It's sort of servicing the plot basically, but it's not interesting service to the plot, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
I
So I love Heimdall.
oh
I love
yeah.
how they did Heimdall, and
Yeah.
I was also gonna say that if like you notice that some of the best scenes in Thor
Mm-hmm.
are all the improvised scenes.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Particularly
and
in Ragnarok where I feel like
yeah,
that's
well, the
more
whole most of Ragnarok was improvised. Like pretty much
yeah.
all of it was. So
Yeah, like it's like they had the script, but they used the takes where he just didn't follow it at all. Yeah,
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 like you know the whole speech that Odin does to Thor. You know when he casts him out. You know it's like
yeah.
that whole scene completely improvised by Anthony Hopkins. Completely,
In the first
and like
one, or
in
in
the first movie when he does the speech to Thor when he casts them out from Asgard.
that was improvised.
Yeah, that whole scene was improvised, and like you know, he actually like there's like story behind that he actually like a lot of people got teary after that scene because he put a lot of emotion into it through the
Huh?
improvisation. Yeah.
That's interesting. That seems interesting to improvise that specific scene. So I just wonder,
But
where did you see? Was that like said by someone who worked on the film, or
yeah, I can't remember where I saw it, but I remember it being said by somebody that worked on the film. But fairly
interesting?
sure that particular scene was improvised in the film, and I was like,
Hmm.
and it shows how good of an actor Anthony Hopkins is. You know.
Hmm. Hmm. Interesting. I did not know that. Apparently,
Yeah,
it's very interesting part.
and
Yeah.
I gotta say that's one of the best scenes in the movie. You know, when he
Mm.
casts out Thor because
Yeah.
it has that raw emotion in it. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I just sort of realized we haven't actually touched on Tom Hiddleston as Loki, who was a
Oh,
fan favorite. I've never really gotten the love for Loki's character. Like, he's not.
really?
No, like he's not bad. I I think what it is actually is the fan base behind that Loki's character is the problem. It's not the actor's fault.
Yeah.
It's
I
just
will.
that his
I will say,
fangirls are really a
yeah,
lot, and they
and
kind of
like,
take away from it.
yeah, and like, I think he plays Loki really well. Don't get me wrong. I
Mm.
think he really suits Loki,
Mm.
and like, I couldn't see anyone else playing Loki at this point.
Yeah,
But like in this movie, he's like, I think just trying to find how he's gonna play Loki.
yeah. I think at this one he feels sort of like he's trying to find his footing and trying to find sort of the balance to his character
Yeah.
to make him work.
And like, I always got frustrated that they bring up the bit that he's a half frost giant, right? They bring it up, they give him the
Yeah,
casket of eternal winter and all that kind of stuff,
yeah,
and then they
exactly.
do nothing with it in next films.
Yeah,
Pretty much,
exactly.
they do nothing.
It's a fact that I always forget about Loki that he is a frost giant or part frost giant, like because
And the
it
only
never comes up in any of the other
yeah,
films.
and the only time you see him in like a full frost giant form is in Party for What If episode when
Yeah, that is
if
true. Yeah,
yeah, it's the what if Loki didn't stay in Asgard. That's the only time you see him as a frost giant,
yeah.
really.
It's interesting that they introduce him and they make it a big part of his character, and then after this first Thor film, they just are like they just forget about it and
Yeah,
they just move
sweep it
on.
under the rug.
It's
Yeah,
like this didn't happen. And like I will say, I think Loki. I really started to like Loki's character when he got his own TV show. I think that really...
That's fair. Loki TV show is pretty good.
Yeah. But yeah, this is sort of just like, it's just like fine, I guess.
Surprisingly enough, I started liking Loki more in Dark World.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, from what I've seen, didn't really like Loki until, the first Avengers film or Thor 2. I think that's when he really started to get his footing for a lot of people. But yeah, and that's what I think most people sort of agreed at this point. He's sort of one of the weaker Marvel villains.
Yeah. Which is a shame because in the comic books, again, he's actually like one of the main villains / anti-heroes in Marvel in general. Like not just Thor, but in like Marvel comics in general.
Like wasn't he the first villain the event? Well, he was part of like the first Avengers comic book. Like, I think I saw something that he like mind controls Hulk or something, and then or something like that. I think
I know Ultron's like one of the first Marvel villains out there as well.
Yeah.
So like he's online. He's been around as pretty much as long as Ultron's been around as a villain.
Yeah.
And he's probably just as important. So
I think that like sort of the whole I think he was a good choice for the first Avengers film to be the villain.
Yeah.
Because he was the only really established character they had that they could use, and plus he had lots of connections to Thanos and all that.
Yeah.
Like he's in this film, Loki's character, he doesn't have not bad actors but he's playing off other characters who aren't as well written as the Avengers characters are in that first Avengers film. So I think it doesn't work as well there, but here it works. Like it's not like it doesn't work as well because they need the characters he's interacting with are not as well written as they could be, so it doesn't do a lot for him. And sort of round out the main sort of cast, we've got Natalie Portman as Jade Foster, who's a big part of the new one. She's not really great in this film or in Thor 2, to be honest. I don't think
I still think it's a good pick. Like they picked the right actress to play her, but I don't think they gave her enough opportunity to be acting her pretty much.
Yeah. That's the thing. I think in the MCU, I think in the early stages they pick good actors to play parts. They just don't give them enough to do
screen time.
They don't give them enough screen time or give them enough things to do in that part. So hopefully, with this new Thor, Taika will do stuff with Natalie Portman, and she'll be a well-written character. But she seemingly is in a very integral part of this new Thor. I would like to hope that they can finally do something interesting with her character, with Jane, and really give her character more depth. Because at this point in these Thor films she's been in, she's just sort of like, oh, Thor, you left, and oh no, Thor's leaving, and she's just sort of being complaining and just sort of not really being that interesting.
And Jane's a lot like a very cool character in general. Like, for instance, if you've ever watched the Avengers TV show, Avengers Assemble.
I don't think I have.
That's a really good TV show. Recommend it. Jane is actually like this badass paramedic in that TV show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and she's like, risking her life going out there, even when there's supervillains and all that, terrorizing, and she goes running in and helping people.
Yeah.
So, like, I think they could have done so many other media outlets, like TV shows and the comics, have done so much more with her character. But in this, it's like, she's there.
She's there,
She's there.
And I mean, most of the human characters as well are just sort of there as well, and don't really add too much to the to the film. So the film is, there is a lot of dialogue and exposition in this. There's like lots of science talk and explanation of like what the 9 realms are and how the Bifrost works and all that, and
yeah,
it's and I understand that we as an audience need to know this and need to have good explanations of why this is what it is, but it just needs to be done more dynamically and more interestingly, because they're just sort of saying things and just being like, here's a ton of information and you just have to comprehend it all, and it's just a lot to take in sort of all at once.
Yeah, agreed. You got to pace it a little bit more.
Pace it out, yeah, exactly. But and I think that like a lot of Marvel films, it's not a lot of Marvel films, but a few Marvel films have that sort of problem where they need to get information out to the audience and explain things so things make sense, but it's just not done in a...
I could say another example, Captain Marvel. I felt like Captain Marvel was the exact same thing where they just pushed out so much for it. So much information.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It just...
it's kind of overwhelmed, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah. And I guess like the human characters in like the second movie get a little bit more...
Yeah, they do a bit more with them. And they sort of... Yeah, they do more with them, and I think it's sort of because the characters are established at that point, but like they're still not really that well written in that film.
Like, you know, the whole thing, like, you know, Jane has the reality stone inside of her at the moment.
Yeah,
whatever they called it, ether or whatever.
Yeah,
and it's like, and the Dark Elves are just terrible. They do the Dark Elves so badly.
Yeah, well, we're gonna get onto the Dark World in just a couple minutes. Just we'll just sort of say a couple more things about Thor, and then we'll move on. Yeah, I think this Thor. I think that like there's a lot of stuff on Earth, which is fine. I don't mind that, but it's just not. They need to sort of do more interesting things while they're there on Earth, and then like. Stuff on Asgard I don't find particularly interesting because Thor isn't there, so I'm just like, well, when's Thor coming back, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The final fight scene's pretty good against Loki and Thor.
Yeah. After Loki has tried to... Well, he saves Odin. He's sent the Destroyer to kill Thor, and then he's tried to have Odin be killed by the Frost... Giants, and then he saves them. It was a ploy.
Yeah, it's all him manipulating. Like that's how Loki is in general. Is usually he's the manipulator in the background, you know.
Yeah, and we definitely get that in pretty much every film he's in. And yeah, so he goes, and then him and Thor have that final battle on the bridge and in the room, and yeah, there's just lots of. I think, like, a lot of the fight scenes in Marvel films are very well shot and put together. And so they sort of do... But I do think DC... Like, I don't know, because I think in Marvel, I do think they're definitely getting more to it now, but a lot of Marvel's films, pretty much throughout most of the entire franchise... They feel like that specific director's sort of films, like they're shot in that sort of way, or they do like, you know, angles, or they sort of infuse specific elements of directors.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And this one has, and this first Thor has a lot of Dutch angles in it for an unknown reason, other than I guess the director just likes Dutch angles. It's very out there, but I think like. Yeah, this film it kind of does feel a bit like a Kenneth Branagh film, who's the director, but it also just doesn't feel that interesting in terms of how it's shot and put together in sort of a technical sense and sort of editing and that. It's just sort of point A to B. It's sort of just it's functional editing and directing, but it's not like anything amazing, you know?
Yeah. And like I feel like it just needed a little bit more to it in general.
Yeah, but yeah. Anyway, yeah. Loki, he dies, quote unquote. And then the bridge has been destroyed, and then everything sort of wraps up nicely, as a lot of these Marvel films do, which isn't a bad thing. It's just how a lot of them end. There's a happy ending.
Yeah.
And then there's like the post-credit scenes, which sort of leads into the Avengers, where Selvig and he sees Loki and all that, and then that leads into the first sort of Avengers film. I think this first film, there's not a whole lot to say, really, honestly. I think like it's
alright.
It's like it's a decent film, but there's not a whole lot to say about it. Like, it's sort of very Phase 1 Marvel. It's very functional. It just sort of gets to the point. It does what it needs to do, and that's okay. You know, it introduces Thor and Loki and Asgard and all that, and that's fine. But it's not as interesting to sort of go through it, unlike Thor: The Dark World, which fails as a film, and Thor: Ragnarok, which very well succeeds, but in my opinion, and we'll get to that momentarily. Are there any sort of final things you want to say about this first Thor before we move on?
No, not really. It was it was there. It was a movie.
It was a movie, yeah.
It was an introduction to Thor.
Mm-hmm.
It had some good moments in it, but most of the time it was like, it was there.
I mean, I think the best scene, just before we wrap up on this, I think the best scene of the film is when Thor, he's going to get Mjolnir, and he's, fighting through all those shield guys, and he's trying to lift the hammer and he can't. Like, I think that's probably the best part of the film. It's
I gotta say, like, he put Chris Evans,
Chris Hemsworth.
Chris
Evans is Captain America.
Yeah. Brain. Chris Hemsworth does like really good job to bring that emotion. That like, oh my god, I can't lift my hammer.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what makes me special, you know?
Yeah, exactly. He goes sort of from like pure sort of happiness and just like, oh look, it's my hammer, and then he tries lifting and he can't, and he's just trying to lift it and he can't, and then he just sort of yells into this guy, So I'd give the first Thor film a 6 out of 10. It's decent.
I would give it probably the same. 6 out of 10.
6 out of 10, yeah. Alright, and then after that, we've got maybe the worst MCU film in Thor: The Dark World.
I would say it's not the worst, but it's up there.
What would you say is worse?
Look, people might hate me. Captain Marvel. Did not like Captain Marvel whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, I'll have to rewatch it for this when the new one comes out, but I didn't particularly care for it either. I just think
I didn't like how, like, yes, in the comic books, Captain Marvel's like very cocky and all that.
But you need to write that well.
And I just don't think they wrote her well in the whole MCU at all. I just don't think they wrote her well.
Like Iron Man, for example. I'll say this. Iron Man, his character is very cocky and a bit of a dick. And and it took them a bit of time to get his character right, I felt. Like, I really like him in that first Iron Man, but it did take them a bit of time to sort of get that character right. So hopefully her character will get better as the series goes on. They just need to sort of iron out the kinks with her character, I think.
Yeah.
But this Thor: The Dark World, so I didn't see this when it came out. I didn't see this until like a couple years ago, and it was more just so that I could say I've seen all the Marvel films, because I just didn't care. Everyone I knew, everything I saw about it, like all the reviews were like, this is bad, this is like the worst Marvel film, don't see it. And I was like, alright, cool, I will not go see it. And then, I rewatched it yesterday, and man, it's not as bad as I remember, but it isn't good.
Yeah. It isn't good.
Yeah,
but...
it's, So they introduced the Dark Elves in this as the sort of main antagonistic force. They're a bit bland. They don't really do a whole lot with them, do they?
Nah. Wasted opportunity, I say.
Yeah, because I take it from the way you're speaking in the comics, they're much cooler characters and they're much more Yeah,
And like if you look into mythology and all that too, they're way cooler as well. You know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, they just don't. I don't know. Like, I don't like they. Yeah, something about them just doesn't really work.
And like, did they even bring up the light elves as well? Like, there's dark and light elves. Did they even? I
Oh, I'm
can't even
trying to
remember that
think. I
they
just
brought
watched this.
up the
I
light
watched
elves.
this. Yeah, I watched this film yesterday, and I don't remember them bring. I don't remember. I don't think
because
so.
because like in like history standpoint and battle mythology and like so many other things have it that like the light and dark elves are like constantly like
Mm-hmm.
fighting each other because
Yeah, because they're
one's light, one's dark.
one
That's
like
how
yeah,
it works.
the opposites of each other. Yeah, yeah. The film really just sort of shows that it's just sort of Asgard versus the Dark Elves. It doesn't really do much more
Yeah,
beyond that, and I just think like the film doesn't do a whole lot with it. Like again, I think like Natalie Portman's character is just sort of Jane Foster is just sort of there, like isn't as doing much to service the stuff. Well, she does a bit more in that she is sort of she finds the ether
yeah,
and then it's like in her body and they have to get it out because like if they don't she'll like die or whatever it is like she needs and
yeah,
it's a big deal. But I'm just sort of I think like it just doesn't really work.
yeah.
uh
I could totally agree with that.
yeah, like she just like they just don't really. I don't know, like because they were they were slowly building to Infinity War and Thanos and the Infinity Gauntlet and everything, and
Yeah,
they had introduced a few stones at this point, but they just sort of like some of the films that introduced the Infinity Stones, like the first Guardians of the Galaxy, for example,
does it really well, I think.
or Doctor Strange, that sort of thing. Like those two, those one of the those are sort of like good introductions to the Infinity Stones,
Yeah,
and then they just sort of don't. But this film, they just sort of don't do a whole lot. They're just like you can't touch her, or you'll be, or stuff will happen.
and it's wasted potential pretty much.
Yeah.
Like, oh, they could have done something with that.
Yeah, I think like I think the only really good stuff of the film is when Thor and Malekith are fighting and they're sort of falling through sort of dimension, well not dimensions but like worlds, realities, yeah, and they're just going to different parts of the universe. Like I think that's the only really good stuff. Everything else is just sort of like it's just like really like this is what they decided to follow up that like to do with Thor post Avengers. Like we've got, it makes sense that Loki's on Asgard and he's prisoner and everything, but it's just sort of like okay,
it kind of just sucks.
Yeah,
Boring.
you just need to like. I do think I think Loki is a bit better of a character here. I think they
100%. Like how like in the prison, he's there, he's disguising it as looking perfect, but then all of a sudden the illusion drops and he's there on the floor.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice sort of reveal in the film.
The blood on his foot. That's actually from an actual cut that he happened while they were doing that. While they were making that, apparently that was an actual like cut, and they just kept it in the movie.
I mean that makes sense because everything in that room is sort of broken.
I don't know how true that one is. I don't know how true that one is, but I remember hearing that that's an actual cut. That's actually him bleeding.
Yeah, I didn't notice that sort of part of the scene. I wasn't really focusing in on it, but yeah, no, it's part of the film, and it definitely seems like something that would just sort of happen accidentally, and just like, oh, we can keep this in because it fits in the scene.
And I think there's also another scene when Jane slaps Thor.
Yeah, and
and
she
that's like an actual like
slap.
slap, like
Yeah,
because they took like 19 tries to do the fake one, and they were like, just slap him, and he was like, yeah. Chris was like, yes, just slap me, and she just gives him
yeah,
a fake.
yeah.
And then and she does the same thing with Loki, and it's funny as.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. I think that happens a lot in films where they need to do like a slapping scene, where like a woman slaps a guy, and they try
Yeah,
faking it, but it's really hard to fake that kind of thing
and
when
you
like
got to line it up and all that kind of
yeah,
stuff.
and then it's usually like a close up, so you
Yeah,
need to do it for real. Yeah, and so yeah, a lot of the time it just sort of boils down to having to actually slap their scene partner.
yeah, and like going going back to the topic of Loki, um, I think he's a lot more. He's way better in this movie. He's got a lot more character to him. He uses a
Yeah,
lot more of his illusionary powers. I think.
yeah, I
Like,
think yeah. Like the other good scene that I actually quite like is when he hit like Thor has broken him out and he's dressing up at. Well, he's not dressing
Captain
up. He's
America.
yeah. He becomes like a guard and then he makes Thor become Sif. Then he becomes Captain America, which I think is a really nice moment.
Okay, I recently learned this.
Hmm.
Again, I like going and learning weird facts about movies, right?
So, yeah, same
So
here. I loved
how
it.
that scene happened was that originally Chris Evans was on the same set and they had access to the costume, and
Yeah.
so he was like, "Can I try the costume on?" And so he just randomly was like playing Loki in the costume, and he did the truth, American and the American way,
Yeah.
truth, justice, and the American way, and he did that, and the director at the time
Yeah.
saw that and actually really liked it, and so that's why they were like, "Hey, Chris, you want to do this scene,
Yeah.
the little cameo?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure," and that's how it happened.
Yeah. That happens a lot, I found. Like, where actors will just sort of be nearby. Because that happens, yeah. And that totally makes sense for this. Because it's very sort of out of nowhere, which is like, oh, he's now, you know,
He's
Captain
there,
America.
yeah,
And because, like, it would make sense that you could probably get Chris Evans to do. Like, because I know he was just on set, but, like, it would make sense to be like, yeah, who can be Captain America? Because, like, if he had to become Tony Stark, it would be, like, very expensive to get Robert Downey Jr. in and all that
oh,
kind of thing.
just Robbie Down Jr. He takes a lot of money for this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Like, I think that's, like, the only good scene. That and the sort of final battle with Thor and Malekith falling through different realities. I think those
I
are, like,
also
the...
I also distinctly remember the scene when Loki like fakes cutting off Thor's hand.
Mm,
I also remember that scene just as a more shock value scene, like, oh my god, cut
mm-hmm.
off his hand, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, no, he didn't. It was an
Yeah,
illusion.
exactly. It is, yeah, an illusion, and yeah, it is. Yeah, I think, like, yeah, I just sort of think this film, like, that's like another sort of good sort of small moment in it, but I think a lot of this film is just kind of boring and just sort
Yeah,
of goes nowhere and doesn't really do a whole lot for the MCU.
I would 100% agree on that.
Because it's sort of, because the beginning of both these two Thor films start with like a flashback of like, oh, Odin fought this army of
Yeah,
people. Like both of the first two Thor movies start with that, and then it just sort of is like, oh, and now in present day, here's what's happening, and it's just sort of like, I'm
yeah,
not as
keen.
interested. Like it just sort of like, it's not engaging enough.
Yeah,
And then there's the stuff like again with the human characters like with Darcy and Jane, and they're like, oh, and they're like throwing the things into like the wherever the ether is, and it's like, oh, look, it keeps going through, and then I don't know, it just sort of goes on a bit with sort of pointless tangential moments that don't really add anything and that are just quite boring, honestly.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's boring. It gets really boring, that part.
Yeah, and like the dark elves, they sort of break into Asgard and they kill Thor's mum, which is sort of is like,
it's supposed to be like such a significant part, but it's like really brushed over. Like, oh, that happened.
Yeah, like like we mentioned, like you mentioned. Sorry, like when mentioned before, when Loki, he's in his room and he reveals it to be like a mess and everything. Like, that's a nice bit, but just the scene. But I just don't really have that emotion towards it because I didn't really care for his mum. So when she dies, I just don't. It's just nothing.
Yeah, nothing for it.
Nothing.
Yeah. Like, oh, it happens. Okay, cool. But like, yeah, like honestly, there's only a couple of redeeming things for that, and that's like Loki and again the fight scene at the end, and that's it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's kind of like a pretty.
Yeah, it's a pretty. I don't want to say boring. Worthless, but it is pretty pointless and doesn't really do a whole lot for me. It's one of the MCU films that I'll be like, I don't want to have to watch that again. Like, I only rewatched it for the purpose of this. I'm never like, oh, I want to watch a Marvel film. Oh, let's throw on Thor: The Dark World. Yeah, I'm never like that. I'm like, oh, Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, if I was to rewatch it, I'd be like, oh, Guardians of the Galaxy, that's pretty good. I like that film a lot. Or Thor Ragnarok, or something like that.
Oh,
I got put on.
That's Thor Ragnarok, and
but this, it just sort of. There's good ideas, they just don't execute them well enough.
Yeah.
And it is interesting, though, because two of the writers on this film, like, I don't know how much involvement they had in this film, but they are the credited writers, and they wrote, like, Infinity War and Endgame and this two Captain America, Winter Soldier and Civil War. Like, they've written.
Those were really good.
Yeah, too. And I think they wrote the first Captain. They wrote all the Captain Americas, in fact, and then they wrote this. And it's just sort of like, what happened? Like, and there was a third writer, so I do wonder, like, which writers, like, who did what?
Yeah.
But it is also interesting because the other writer also was one of the writers on Thor Ragnarok, so it's just kind of like, it's weird when good writers write bad things.
Yeah.
Like, and this film just, it's not like the worst film ever made or anything like that. But, like, it just doesn't feel like it just isn't there. And it just sort of, and it's not even, it's not like one of those bad films where, like, where it's entertaining to talk about how bad it is. It's just sort of like, it's a film that exists to say it. Because we haven't really been saying as much about this film, I've sort of noticed, but it's just like, it's not interesting to talk about, but I will say the ending where that sort of, it leads into Ragnarok, where Odin is missing. We don't know where he is, but Loki is pretending to be Odin. I think is like a nice moment.
Yeah, that's a pretty.
And then, and I think that's like a good ending because they'll be like, oh man, what's gonna happen now?
I gotta say that, like, with most Marvel movies, they're like pretty good at like leaving. Like, oh, what's gonna happen next?
Yeah,
you know?
And then there's the post-credit scenes where Volstagg and Sif take the ether to the Collector, who is the Guardians of the Galaxy, with the Infinity Stones, and then I think this was even like more continuing on to touch. I think this would have been the first time they really touched on and mentioned the Guardians and the Infinity Stones. I think this would have been one of the first times they referenced them specifically as the Infinity Stones, because we'd seen, the Mind Stone and the Space Stone at this point, and then there's the Reality Stone, which is this one, which is the Ether. But it was the first time they were called that, and then that leads into Guardians of the galaxy, and then there's the other post-credit scene where it's Thor. He comes back to Earth, and then him and Jane have a moment, but that doesn't really have any importance to the story. It's not leading to anything. It's just sort of a moment, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so do you want to rate this one and then move on, unless there's anything finally you've got to say about the film?
I would say I would give it like a 3.
Yeah,
and that's probably being a bit generous even for that.
Yeah, I gave it a 4. It's my least favorite Marvel film currently. Yeah, I just think it doesn't. It's a bit crap. I just think it's yeah. And then to wrap up, to sort of round out this episode, we get one of the best MCU films in Thor Ragnarok.
Top 10,
easy, yeah. I saw this film when it came out in the cinema. Well, I saw the trailer, and I sort of instantly thought, okay, this is very different to the other Thor films looked. And there's like lots of color, and there's lots of, you know, inventive visuals and stuff. And I'm like, this looks really good. And then,
actually, I believe Thor. So, fun fact about the song they used, the Led Zeppelin song,
Immigrant Song, yeah.
Yeah. Fun fact: that song is very famously known to be incredibly hard to convince Led Zeppelin to let somebody use it. Like incredibly hard.
Really?
Yeah. Like you have to like pay out, and like they had to pay out Led Zeppelin so much money for that.
Yeah.
But first of all, they had to ask, and Led Zeppelin had to agree, and then they had to come to terms. And usually, no one even gets to the point of coming to terms about the payment. Like usually, Led Zeppelin just straight up says no. Yeah, it's one of the hardest songs to get like permission for in Hollywood.
That's really interesting.
That's why you don't hear that song that often in movies.
I think the only other example I can think of is Shrek 3, where it's used briefly, also not very well, to be honest. Yeah, it seems that it's not really
used in a lot of films.
I'm just looking at it. Yeah, it says like use of the song in media. It's like School of Rock, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, and Thor Ragnarok. Like it's barely that's like and then Shrek 3. It's like 4 films.
Yeah,
is interesting.
Yeah, it's one of those songs that is super hard to like. They pretty much like say no to every offer they get asked for to do that song in a film. So
yeah,
and they use it so well.
It's used twice in twice in Ragnarok. I think it was used in the trailer, and it's like, because it being used in the trailer, it's like, okay, they're doing something different now, and I like this. And then there was the whole sort of, I guess, reveal that it's effectively going to be Thor / Planet Hulk, or like Gladiator Hulk in the film as well.
Yeah, World War Hulk.
World War Hulk, yeah. And I was like, oh, this is going to be
excited
really good.
For the trailer. Yeah. When the trailer came out, I was like, oh my god, they're doing World War Hulk. Oh.
Yeah.
Of course, we didn't get them to see as much as World War Hulk as we wanted. Like, I wanted it to be like, because like the whole thing behind World War Hulk was that the Illuminati, which is like consisting of Doctor Strange, Tony Stark, Mr. Fantastic. Right? They were like, oh, we think Hulk is too dangerous. So let's send him off-world. Yeah. And they do, and they he crash lands into Sakaar. Sakaar, and he becomes a gladiator, overruns the king, and becomes the king of the world of Sakaar. And he actually gets he actually marries a fellow gladiator, and has a child, and then the shuttle explodes, and he blames the Illuminati for the spaceship exploding that he came on to. So he heads back to Earth, just for the sole purpose to destroy them.
Yeah, and is that what leads into Planet Hulk? Where
No, Planet Hulk. That is, I'm fairly sure, right? But it's like it's pretty much like Hulk at his strongest, pretty much.
Yeah.
And like everyone agrees that World War Hulk is the strongest Hulk has been, probably, most likely.
Yeah.
And this is like Hulk has infinite strength, technically.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think there isn't as much of the gladiator stuff as we see. Like there's the really great scene of Thor versus Hulk in the gladiator pit, which is a really great scene.
And just him going, yes, that's a friend from work.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a really great bit. Yeah.
A fan actually asked Chris Evans, not Chris Evans. Oh my god, Chris Hemsworth, to say that for the line.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, they had a young kid, like a kid who, like one of those like Make-A-Wish kids or something. Set, and he suggested that as a line, and they're like, yeah,
and it worked
as a line, yeah.
It worked. It was so good. It's one of the best lines in the MCU.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this film really makes Thor interesting. I think this is where Thor finally, and I do think that Infinity War is the best performance, like Chris Hemsworth's best performance in the MCU and the best sort of version of Thor we've seen so far. I don't know what Love and Thunder is going to be like, but I think this is the sort of beginning of like he's a very funny character in this.
I think I liked him in Ragnarok more than Infinity War. Sorry, Infinity. Just because he went back to being a lot more brooding, a lot more.
Yeah, and you don't really care for the whole sort of brooding.
Like, no, him. I don't mind the brooding, but we've seen that already for like 2 bloody films, pretty much.
Yeah, plus the 2 Avengers films. Which,
yeah. And like Thor is, he lives in, Asgard. That's it's where there's endless feasts and alcohol and all that. They're supposed, and like the whole thing of Asgard is it's the place where warriors go to fight for eternity and drink and eat at the many halls until and never get full.
Yeah. No, I kind of get where you're coming from with that. I think like because Infinity War is a much darker story, and so there isn't really many opportunities for Thor to be jovial and jokey, and and whereas in Ragnarok he has a lot of joking moments, but he does have sort of the more emotional moments, like when he's talking to Odin towards the end of the film. Talking about
that was a really good scene.
God of Ham. Well, he's not the God of Hammers; he's the God of Thunder. And I think that
Sif is a really good villain.
Sif? You mean Hela?
Hela, sorry. Sif is her dog.
No,
the wolf.
Sif is
it's Sif,
the female warrior.
I should know this.
I think it's like Fenris is the wolf. I think
Fenris. Fenris.
Fenris
I'm
is the wolf, and Hela is the villain.
Yeah,
she's one of the better MCU villains, but I don't think she's particularly great either. She's like fine, but she's not amazing or anything.
I just find it that Fenris, the wolf, is actually technically in the actual mythology. Fenris is Loki's son, one of Loki's sons.
Right. Oh yeah, because Loki in the comics is very in Norse mythology, and I mean, to be fair, a lot of Norse gods are very out there with their mythology.
Very it's very complicated. Yeah. Let's just say. But I just find that funny a little bit as somebody that knows his mythology. That's like, that's actually Loki's son, technically.
Yeah.
the real life mythology.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think like this film just has a lot of really just good stuff going on with it. I think like the opening scene where Thor is sort of, you think he's narrating to you, but he's just talking to a skeleton he's made friends with in the sort of cage, and then he's talking with the Surtur about all this stuff. I think that's a really good introduction scene, and it really sort of illustrates how this is going to be very different to the other Thor films. Like, this isn't going to be the sort of serious, sort of brooding.
It's going to be.
They're going to have fun with this.
Yeah,
and
I think that's what made the movie really successful. Was it's a fun movie.
Yeah, I think that helps. I think a lot of people, like, when I saw this, it's like just every joke was landing. Like, people were just finding like every sort of, even the smaller jokes, the sort of like just seeing this, it just really got a laugh out of the audience when I saw this. When it came out, it was and I had a lot of fun with it too. I really did enjoy the film. I do think it is one of the best films in the MCU. It has a lot, just really has a lot going for it, and there's lots of just really great moments in it. Where we meet some new characters. There's Korg in the film, who I think is a lot of fun as a character.
I think like everyone loves Korg.
Korg is such a good character. And he's only in like a handful of scenes. He's not actually in it a whole lot, but he's just having a lot of fun. Like, Taika Waititi's having a lot of fun playing Korg, and like when he sees like Loki's sort of projection self, and then he disappears through the wall, and then Korg runs over and kisses like, "Piss off, ghost!" Like that.
That's a good scene.
That's a really good part. And I just and just so, like the way he sort of speaks, he's like, "Oh yeah, you want to come? We've got a spaceship," like he's saying like that kind of stuff. I think really is
I can't do a
New Zealand
accent, it's like New Zealand. Yeah, but it's like I love it when he goes like, "The revolution has started."
Yeah. He's just very and it's like, "Oh look, you could have this like 3-pronged sword if it would work if there are three, stab 3 vampires if they're huddled close together."
Or like when the like what's the other dude that he's
Meek,
with?
the
Meek.
sort of...
It's like they're like, "Oh wait, he's just dead."
No, it's like, "Oh yeah, I stepped on him and I've just felt bad," and carrying him around. And it's like, oh, he's not dead, he's alive apparently. Oh, and then I think there's lots of good bits of comedy in the end. There's also some really sort of darker stuff into it, like Valkyrie's character, who is also introduced in this. How she was, part of the Valkyries of Asgard, and they faced Hela and they lost. And we just see this scene of them, of just like hundreds of Valkyries trying to fight Hela to,
bitter end,
Yeah, and there's just like some really great shots of like from behind of Hela, and you can just see all the Valkyries coming in on the like you see all these just great shots. I think this is one of the most colourful MCU films, and they just do a lot of really great stuff with they just do a lot with it.
I think they just do a lot of great stuff in general with it. Like, it was probably just one of the best. It's one of the best MCU movies for a reason.
Yeah, and they also like sort of, because I think this film, it sort of does away with all the stuff from the previous films that didn't work. Like there's like no human characters in this film. They're all from like Asgard or from Sakaar or from whatever. Like, you've only really got Doctor Strange, but he's he's a sorcerer, so he doesn't really count because he's got powers.
You've got Dr. Banner. You got Banner.
Banner, yeah, but yeah, he also becomes the Hulk. So he, again, like they're the only two human characters, but they aren't just humans. Like they've got more to them.
Yeah.
As opposed to the other stuff that is like the other characters. Like in the first two Thor films, where like Jane Foster is just a human, like she's just a regular human, that kind of thing. And in this,
like Thor falls in love with, and
it's like, it's just sort of like, yeah, exactly. And yeah, there's just a lot of this film just really sort of takes away all the problems and all the fat of the first two, and just like we're just gonna get rid of all of that. And we're just gonna introduce a ton of other stuff. And I think most of the scenes in this are pretty good. They shot this in Australia, actually. I remember.
Yeah,
that was like a big deal when I was like on my way to school, and they're like, "Oh yeah, they're shooting the new Thor film down in like the city," and I'm like, that's cool.
I think we might have like. We might have talked about that ages ago when it came out.
Yeah, I think because I think like they do a lot of MCU stuff here. Like they shoot here quite often because it's cheaper, I think, and they do a lot of visual effects stuff. They've got like tons of studios as well.
Well, whenever you see like a desert or beach scene in any movie, it is shot here right in Australia. We have like one of the best deserts in the world to just shoot movies in.
And
the best beaches.
Yeah, exactly. Because watching like the scene where Thor and Loki, they go to like the home, like they go to the old person's home where Loki says he left Odin, and I'm just looking at like in the background of like that looks like an Australian street, like the buildings and the light, like it just like that looks how Australia looks like when I go to the city. That's what it looks like. And I know they reshot a scene. They shot like a scene, and then they're like, "Oh, that doesn't work." When Thor's hammer is broken by Hela. In the original trailer, it's in like an alleyway, and I think they were just like, "Oh, that doesn't look too good." So then they shot it in like a field because that looks
way better.
Yeah. They shot it in like the Central District here in Brisbane, so they were very very close to home. I could have gone down to see it if I had wanted to. I wish I could. They shot it. Yeah. And then they shot the most recent Thor film here as well, but I think they shot it in like Sydney or something. Yeah, I think they've set up sort of base to shoot here, which is fair enough.
It would have been funny if it was like Byron Bay, because that's where
Chris Hemsworth lives. Yeah, because it's he wouldn't be too far from home, because it looks like they usually shoot in America, so he has to travel around the world.
It would. I've been to Byron Bay, and like it would have been funny running into Chris Hemsworth. That would have been hilarious.
Yeah,
go around a little bit of tangent. Like he's such a good guy, good bloke. Apparently, like he's such a good guy.
Yeah,
and like he. Honestly, I couldn't see anyone playing Thor as well. Like I couldn't see anyone else.
Yeah, they really sort of capitalize on Chris Hemsworth as an actor and sort of as a present. Like he really brings like a lot of comedy to the role, but he also brings he brings a lot of sort of seriousness to it, and plus he just looks like Thor. He's sort of an actor of like, okay, we need like a really big guy, and he really
I find it funny though that originally his brother auditioned for Thor.
Yes.
And then he auditioned and he got the part, and he was like, and he got his brother like a cameo in one of the movies, if I believe so.
Yeah, in this one actually, in Thor Ragnarok, the scene where Loki is like playing, like they've got that play of like this of Loki's death scene.
Yeah, that's it.
Dark World, and they have like Luke Hemsworth as Thor, and they've got like Matt Damon as Loki, and Sam Neill as Odin. Like that's a a really nice bit. And I think like this really, yeah, it does a lot with the film, and they do, yeah, there's lots of really, yeah, just lots of really good parts in it. There's like some really, yeah, funny bits in it, and they really,
and I feel like they do a lot in the film, but they make it work. Like they don't like overdo it. They do it like
yeah,
they do a lot, but it works, and they keep it interesting instead of, like the previous films where there's a lot in the film, but it's like a bit boring in some scenes. But in this, like
yeah,
they keep it interesting throughout the whole movie. They keep the audience engaged.
yeah. That's the thing. They don't really do a whole lot. Like they do a lot with it, but they don't overdo it. Like because there's a lot of sort of crazy shit going on in this, and they don't. But they don't. It's not sort of crazy and mental for the sake of it. It's more just like this is here to service the story, and it just so happens that it's gonna be a bit out there, which I think is a good way. Because I think a lot of people, a lot of filmmakers and writers sort of are like, oh, we just need to put crazy stuff in here, this film, for the sake of it, and it doesn't service the story or it doesn't add anything. It's just kind of like, this isn't, we don't need this, we can just, get rid of it. But, I think this, it's sort of a perfect balance of the comedy and sort of out there elements with the sort of more grounded parts of the film as well, I think.
Yeah, totally agreed.
My only major problem with it is Carl Urban's character as Scourge. He's like the new sort of guy who is like the gay. He replaces Heimdall basically.
Yeah. Oh, and when he look, yeah, that character's a little bit annoying, but I found hey, behold my stuff. That scene. I love that.
Yeah,
scene.
I do like the introduction scene where he's got like the two guns. It's like I call them Des and Troy, because together they destroy. Like I do like that bit, but everything afterwards is just sort of like
hit or miss.
Hit or miss, yeah. Like his redemption moment where he's like, I'm gonna fight these things for Asgard. I'm just like, I don't know if I really care for that. Like that just sort of comes a bit too quickly and a bit out of nowhere. There's no real, like, I know there's sort of bits in the film where they're like, oh, he doesn't want to execute these people, so he's a bit conflicted, but it just isn't.
I feel like he does it out of self-interest, not in...
Yeah, and it does come sort of a bit like, despite the whole sort of foreshadowing, it does come a bit out of nowhere, and it's just like, oh, that's what we're doing. I mean,
like, I was more predicting him, like defying Hela, like going like no, saying no to her, and her just going, oh sweet, you're saying no, knife.
Like, yeah, like earlier on in the film before he starts fighting things. You mean? Right? Like yeah, that sort of. Yeah, like in that execution scene, it was like, no, I'm not going to do it, and then she kills him then. Like, I think that would have probably worked a bit better, because sort of as it is, it's just like, oh, he just sort of decides to become a good guy, and it just sort of... Like,
even though, he executed a bunch of people beforehand.
Yeah, and he's just sort of being he's just been not a very good person. Like, just sort of... That's my only sort of major problem with the film, really. And I do think, like, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I did think a couple bits of comedy were a bit... Didn't fully work, yeah. And that's just sort of personal, a personal thing with the film. It's just a handful of jokes just didn't land for me in the way that they were sort of... intended. The main one actually that I just thought of was when Banner, he's like, oh, I can't become like the Hulk again, because if I do, then like I might stay the Hulk, and I like that sort of whole thing. And then when he has to fight and then like he jumps out of the ship when they're on Asgard,
and he snaps his neck.
Yeah, he just sort of lands on the thing. I'm just sort of like, okay, I get what they're going for, but I just didn't really think it was that funny. And then he becomes the Hulk and he fights the wolf. I'm like, okay, now this is really good, and I really like.
Look, I found it a bit funny just because of the shock value, not for the actual thing.
Yeah,
but I found it funny because it was like, oh, that happened, and then all of a sudden it's like Hulk, which that's how it works, And he even says it himself. I put a bullet in my mouth, and the other guy spits it out. He says that himself.
Yeah, exactly. He, it's hard for him to, self-admittedly, kill himself, which is in the
or just die in general, because the Hulk.
Because the Hulk will just sort of be like, no, I'm not gonna have that happen. But yeah, I think I do really like the stuff in Sakaar. I think that's all good stuff. But it in the third act and the final 30 minutes of the film where they go to Asgard and Thor fights Hela, and then he truly becomes the god of thunder. And then there's the immigrant song, and he's just he's just unleashed as
that whole scene was Thor. Awesome.
Yeah, it was the best part of the film, where Hela's like, what were you the god of again? And then he just hits her with lightning, and then he jumps down onto the bridge, and there's the great shot of him. It's a slow-mo shot of him falling, jumping down onto the bridge onto a sea of them, and then he's
of them stacking up to reaching for him.
Yeah, and then he lands, and then he's just got, and his eye is just
glowing,
and he's just got lightning.
And then you see the next scene, which has Valkyrie slow-mo walking as the ship behind him releases fireworks and all that.
Exactly.
And the whole fight scene in between Hulk and the wolf. Yeah,
it's one of the best scenes in the MCU. I think. Yeah, it's got comedy, but it's also just got great catharsis, just badass moments of this is Thor, this is peak Thor.
And I gotta say,
it's the strongest Thor we've ever seen.
Thor probably has some of the best moments in the MCU. For instance, Infinity War, when he comes into Wakanda.
Yeah, that is one of the best scenes in the film, and one of the best scenes in sort of films in sort of recent history, I would say. And I think because this. Ragnarok is sort of the beginning of Thor becoming the best part, the best version of his character, being one of the best characters in the MCU, and his his entrance into Wakanda it's sort of spawned because of Ragnarok, him truly becoming the god of thunder,
and it was just downright just a good movie.
I really think Taika did, and it is interesting because I always thought he wrote it for the longest time, and then he didn't. I'm like, oh, that's interesting, but he really is just it just this feels like one of it just he brings a certain style and sort of flair to it, and it's just this is.
And that's probably why he's coming back for Love and Thunder, because it was the most successful Thor movie out of them all.
Yeah,
and they're like, sweet, we've got something, let's keep it that way,
Yeah, and then they had him write the new one as well, so they really have faith in him to do great stuff with this, and he does a lot of really good stuff with this film, and has Surtur destroying Asgard to be okay, Asgard is done, it isn't a place anymore, it's the people, that's fine, and then that leads into Endgame, where they have new Asgard.
And the whole scene when, Hulk sees Surtur and just, punches him.
Yeah, and it's just no, we can't fight him, we have to go, and he's like, this is a big monster, though, but, they get on the ship, Asgard is destroyed. And then there's the post-credits scenes where we see the Asgardians' ship a massive ship is pulled up in front of them, and I remember watching that in the cinema. I was like, oh, that's probably Thanos, isn't it?
Yeah,
and then it was, and that's the first scene of Infinity War.
Yeah. And the first stone he collects is the
The
no
space stone.
second stone.
The
No,
second one.
second
Second one.
stone.
Yes, that's right.
It's the
He
power is the space stone.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
he gets the power stone from
Power stone
Xander.
first.
Yeah, yeah, and because Loki just had to take the Tesseract, didn't he? He couldn't just leave it. But
That's Loki for you, you
yeah,
know.
and then there's the second post credit scene, which doesn't really do much, where the Grand Master, who we didn't actually touch on really, who I think is a lot of fun in sort of his very small part, is Jeff
Oh yeah,
Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun in this. He doesn't do a whole lot, and he's not in it that much, but he is quite a bit of fun. Um, and then yeah, he is like, oh no, and then there's all the people of Sakaar, and yeah, and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I love this film. I think it's I think probably top three and no top five MCU. I think it's just out of my
Yeah.
top three, but it's top five MCU. It's one
I
of
would
the
agree with
best.
that.
Yeah, it's just one of the best films, and I bumped my score up. I initially had this as an 8 out of 10, but I bumped it up on this rewatch to a 9 out of 10. Yeah, it's fantastic.
I gotta say, I completely agree with that again. I would put that at a 9 out of 10 again.
Yeah,
Same.
yeah. I mean, it is
Uh,
just one of the best MCU films. I think most people would agree it is top tier, just operating on like sort of every
yeah,
level that
like
these films
MCU
can.
at its peak.
Yeah, it's like peak MCU. It's not the best MCU film, but it is like
No,
truly at the perfect level.
of
Um,
like what the MCU should be. You know what it is.
yeah, exactly. I just love it. It's great. It's yeah, it's a really really great film. So yeah, but just quickly before we wrap up, we've got Thor, Love and
L-
Thunder,
yeah,
which is the new one. I am looking forward to it.
same.
Relatively so. I think that it will be good. It'll probably
Well,
be pretty good. In fact, I think.
they've got a lot of things from the comic books coming in. So
Yeah.
of course they've got Jane coming in. So you know how Mjolnir, this is rebuilt Mjolnir.
Yes.
You saw how in the trailer in the ability where she like kind of swings it and like electric spikes come out, like shards come from it.
Yes. Yeah.
That's an
Yeah.
actual thing in the comics where Mjolnir actually gets destroyed, but gets put back together, and that's one of the abilities that it gets from it being put back together. That it can just throw shards of it.
Mm.
So that was a little nice detail. And of course, bloody what's his name, the God Destroyer himself coming in. My
Yeah.
God, my
Gore the
brain's
God
going.
Butcher.
Yeah, and like the first one of the first things you see him is pulling the sword, and that's the Necro sword, which
Mm.
is like that's a huge thing in the comic books
Mm.
because that's the first symbiote. That's the made from
Oh, yeah. I was
so
talking to someone about this today, and they were talking about how like yeah, the symbiote stuff will.
yeah, and that's like the Necro sword is the first ever symbiote ever to be created by the god of the symbiotes. And like the whole thing behind his story is that he believed in gods for so long, and then his family slowly died from starvation. And
Mm.
then one time he came across two gods fighting, and one god was like, "Hey, help me!" And he was like, "You never helped me." And so
Mm.
he grabbed the necro sword from him and just went stab.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, so cool. And like a lot of people were like, "Oh, he doesn't look like what he looks like in the comics." I'm like,
Mm.
well, in most adaptations, they never look perfect to the comics.
Yeah.
He looks really good. He looks still really good.
Yeah. I think I'm a bit. I mean, I don't know what he is meant to look like
So he's got
in.
like Star Wars, Twi'leks.
Yes.
Yeah, he's virtually just a Marvel Twi'lek with
Mm.
extra long dangly bits and like all white. And yeah,
Ah, okay. That's
if you
well, yeah. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing um what they will do with this new one. I hope that they do a lot of
very promising looking,
doing female Thor, which I'm open to. I think that they will hopefully do her character justice.
Instead of Jane being absolutely batshit boring,
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, are there any sort of final things you wanted to say before we wrapped up?
Not really.
Yeah.
Other than Thor is probably one of my favorite MCU characters,
Yeah.
And again, Chris, I couldn't see anyone else but Chris Hemsworth playing him.
Yeah, so anyway, thank you for joining me for this week's episode. I think it was a lot of fun. And I hope I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with Thor Love and Thunder. So thank you for joining me for this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed. I think I'd love to have you back on for another one at some point in the future. I think you seem to enjoy coming on to do these.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, gives me an excuse to sit down and watch movies.
Yeah. So listen to the other ones I did with Aaron. We did 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later earlier this year, and then we also did a Valentine's Day special with Tom. But listen to the Valentine's one. It does gets a bit out there. We talk about some weird stuff, but
it's a weird movie.
It's a weird movie, and it's well worth the listen. And listen to all the previous episodes that I've done of this show, and I think that's pretty much it. I think that's pretty much all, right? You have anything to say? Yeah. So thank you all for joining me for this one, and I will see all of you guys in the next one. Goodbye.
See ya.